Thank you for joining us here for another edition of The Bridge. This is a youth engagement platform created by the Students on Ice Foundation, and we're here today to discuss storytelling through film. So I guess we'll start with introductions. My name is Olivia Rempel. I'm a filmmaker and journalist, and I'm currently working for Grid Arendal, which is a Norwegian NGO that collaborates with the United Nations Environment Program to communicate science. And I'm I do all sorts of things there, but mainly video and some other multimedia type of storytelling. So Jimmy, would you like to give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Jimmy in the city son, 저쪽이 어쩌네가, Muscat Lake 어쩌네다, Montreal 어쩌네다. My name is Jimmy Blair, and I'm of English, French, and Indigenous heritage. I'm primarily, or I was primarily an actor for a very long time, film and stage and television, and more recently have taken a path of writing, playwriting, and script writing, and I also direct. I've directed for film and also, well, short film anyway, and theater.
I'll go next. My name is Erin Drage. I'm originally from traditional and unceded Mi'kmaq territory in Nova Scotia, and am currently in Alberta, but have been bouncing around a lot recently. I work in the realm of conservation and protected areas, and have also brought storytelling and environmental storytelling specifically into my realm in recent years. And so I've been working at this intersection of society and nature and film. And I'm really excited to continue working in this space and sharing a little bit of it with you all today.
Cool, and I'm Nicholas. I am also a storyteller, filmmaker, and yeah, I've been doing this for I think about 4 years now, full time, kind of ever since I left Expedition. I'm currently on the West Coast, and I live and work primarily in Montreal, also known as Tiohtià:ke. So yeah, it's really cool to be chatting with you guys today. Stoked.
So I see we have some people coming from New York, England, Ontario, and Montreal. So welcome, everyone. So I guess we'll start off with the first question. Can you tell us about when you knew you wanted to go into film? So Nick, would you like to start?
Yeah. There was never like one moment where I was just like, now this is it. I grew up playing with cameras and stuff with my sister in the countryside. We would make all these funny home videos and all this kind of stuff. And I always kind of liked the medium as a way of expressing like my creative side and stuff. And I kind of kept it as like a hobby for a long time. And then got involved with Students on Ice, went up to the Arctic and had, a pretty life-changing experience up there. And I brought my camera with me. And that was sort of the first time where I had been in a new place, totally new, where my mind was really kind of open to exploring and open to like discovering parts of myself and to learning about new places. And I used my camera to kind of like as a medium through which I like captured things that I really liked and captured stories and stuff. And I kind of was like, I reflected on it afterwards, and I put it together. I made a little film afterwards, and really was like, wow, I really enjoyed that. It was sort of this muscle that I hadn't really used in this way, and I kind of started to pursue that afterwards. This was like late 2016, and yeah, and I kind of like I got some good feedback from the stuff that I'd created, and I met some really interesting people, and I said, okay, like why don't I give this a shot? So I guess there was like a moment when I decided to go and do it like full time, but film as like a medium I've been kind of exploring ever since I was pretty young. But when I kind of like, when I got some interesting feedback and like felt like I had made something that I was really proud of that I hadn't really done before. I said, okay, like why not just give that a shot, you know? So I kind of went from there, and here I am, and it's great. I love it. Yeah.
Jimmy, how about you? I mean, I know you do a lot more than just film, but do you want to maybe talk a little bit about how you got interested in film?
Yeah, I mean, it started as just being a performer, um, and that was at a very young age. I like the idea, or I like the instant gratification you get when you perform and people give you a reaction. I like that as a kid.
Yeah.
And I like making people laugh, which I think was like the first kind of step into it. Um, and I kind of explored that a little bit as a kid with my family, but it really started to kick in high school when I turned into a class clown, and I love Saturday Night Live, and I'd come in and imitate like some of the characters that they played, and then in drama class I would do that, like, you know, I just go for the laughs all the time, and I think that brought me to a certain point where I decided to explore performance a little bit more. And as I grew a bit older, I actually fell in love with the art form of storytelling that way. And um and film kind of made its way into my life in Cégep. So that's like grade, anywhere else in Canada, I guess, is grade 12 and 13, where I took communications, and I created film, and I started exploring my creative side that way. So that's, you know, and I think that was kind of my first dive into film. Yeah.
And Erin, do you want to take that one next?
Yeah, so I think similar to Nick, I, as a kid, just loved the medium of videography, of films, of being able to record something and then show everybody later. I thought that was so neat, and I always really wanted to go into film. And I just actually the other day came across these hilarious little videos I made for a film class in grade 11, and it's funny because I had always had the interest, but I think more importantly for me wasn't when I knew I wanted to go into film, but when I was brave enough to acknowledge that I wanted to go into film, because for a long time I used every excuse in the book to not do it. Like I didn't have the technical training, I wasn't creative, I didn't have the equipment that you needed to be in film. And I'd say it was just in my early 20s when I acknowledged that it was actually something I could do and wanted to do. And it was through the mentorship of some really key people who got me in the door of film, Nick actually being one of them, that really set off my motion of pursuing film on a more full-time and serious basis. So it's something that it's always been there. It's always been fun, but I had to get over some insecurities, I think, before I took it on as something more than just playing with a video camera.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for me, I think I was actually more interested in kind of photography as a hobby, but also taking kind of small videos from a pretty young age. And then I actually I went to school to become a print journalist, and so my plan was always to be more of a writer. But then in the process, I took a few video classes and just really kind of loved it so much. And you know, in the end, I'm actually kind of really happy that it happened that way, because I feel like being a really good writer is such an important part of filmmaking, because, you know, both of them are storytelling, just slightly different mediums, and also just like kind of writing proposals and getting your idea on paper is so helpful when you're making a film. So so yeah, I kind of started off to become a writer and ended up becoming a filmmaker. But I'm really glad that it worked out that way. And
That's
so
that's something I'm increasingly learning, is like the power of writing and the importance of writing in the process. Even in the documentary world, which is kind of more a space that I work in, is like you're capturing things that you don't always plan, but you still like have to know sort of ahead of time where they may fit into that story, because otherwise you're kind of stuck afterwards like, with all this great stuff that you didn't plan for or that you didn't really think about in the right way. And yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And also like writing a treatment, like that's essentially just okay, what do I think is going to happen in this documentary, and I'm just going to creative write my way out of it.
Yeah, totally.
So the next question is, what is a film that has greatly impacted you? Who wants to take this one first?
I have one that came up right away when I read this question, and it's called The Runners. It's on Vimeo. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's by this production company called Banyak Films. And it's like an 11-minute short, and it's just about people running, basically. And it's these guys who have basically this bicycle that they've rigged to have this back little cabin where some guy is sitting, and they're filming like random people basically during different seasons running around this park in the UK. I forget exactly where it is. I think it's just in London. And it's so amazing, the stories that they get from people. And I think it's because they capture people in a moment that's like, you're kind of out of breath. You're kind of like, you don't really have time to like ramble. You kind of just like get to the point. And they'll just be like, what does love mean to you? Or like, what's the hardest moment you've gone through in your life? And people are just like, what? Like, what is that question? But then they like get into it. And then they thread all of these incredible people, random, regular people, into this like moving piece. And I just find that's like such a powerful message, I think, because like there's a story in everything, there's a story in everyone, and you just have to kind of like, I mean, I think catch them, yeah, and like at the right moment, but also like find that thread between all the stories. And it's really cool. I recommend everyone watch it if you're kind of thinking about getting into documentary or even just like short film. Just the beauty of like the everyday person. I love stories like that. Yeah, it's called The Runners.
It's interesting, like the idea of like throwing people into a circumstance where they're kind of stripped of their ability to put a filter on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but there's this like show called Hot Ones. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah,
where,
exactly.
Like, where they just set up this guy like interviews you while you're eating like super hot wings, and you have no time nor the physical ability or the mental capacity to create like any sort of filter, and you're like you have no choice but to deal with what you're dealing with physically and answer the question, which creates like almost pure honesty. It's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's another one kind of like that that's similar that I like. It's called 10-Meter Tower, and it's people at the top of a diving board. It's like the highest diving board that you can go, like a public swimming pool. And it's just like this camera is on like regular people trying to dive off this diving board, and they're just like, some people are totally freaked out, and then like, you know, people who you wouldn't expect to have this sort of fear, you know, just like jump off, and then the people who you think are like all good like can't do it. And it's so cool. A similar kind of thing, just catches people in this place and time, and like that's like an art form, is like trying to find people at those moments, you know, where they're stripped down. Yeah. Sorry, other people's favorite films.
I was literally just about to mention 10-Meter Tower. Yeah.
No way.
You know, because
Nice.
Nice. You know, because that's another thing is like, you know, sometimes if you watch some of these shorts that you know get shared a lot, some of them, they're just really simple concepts. And so like that's like one thing that you can learn is like it doesn't have to be a really complicated film for it to be impactful. And then sometimes it's just being at the right place at the right time. Like one film that kind of comes to mind for me is, so when I was in my master's program, someone who was a 2 years ahead of me, she made this film called 4.1 Miles. And it's about the Syrian refugee crisis. And so she's from this small island in Greece. And she basically followed this sea captain as he was going out and pulling people out of the ocean. And it's a short, so you know, I think it was like 20 minutes long, but it's like you didn't need more than 20 minutes of like, this is such an intense story. But like, you know, it's just very simple, like cinematically, but it's just like, it's like the story just almost tells itself.
That sounds wild.
So yeah, sometimes like you don't need crazy like planet Earth level videography in order to make a really powerful story.
No, I mean, and that's, I think that's why, like, I don't know. I think for me anyway, story is first. You create a story and then you decide on which medium you want to use. I was gonna mention a movie that's or a film that was like pretty impactful on me. It was it's called The Guilty. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like a movie. It's Danish, and it's a movie about a 911 operator. But the film is only him. Like there's a couple of seconds of other characters come in, but essentially you just get him answering phone calls, and he deals with this one case in specific. And it's like a 90-minute film where you're just watching one person act.
Wow.
And it holds your attention the entire time. And to me, that's like a great example of what we're talking about. You know, simplicity works when you have a good story and when you're able to execute that story in a way to keep, you know, the drama going and hold people's interest.
I'm already like, I can feel it. Like that's from what you described. It's like 90 minutes. That's got to be something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I recommend it. I think it's on Netflix now, or used to be anyway. It's called The Guilty.
Cool. Very cool.
The original title, I'd have to look it up. I think it's like Den Skylage or something like that. Yeah.
I'm gonna post my video right in the chat.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think you're totally right, Jimmy, about the simplicity and the story first, which is kind of funny because the film I've had in mind for this question is not very simple at all. It's Sea of Shadows, which Nick and I were actually talking about this the other day, and it's a fantastic National Geographic film. It's relatively new. It just came out a couple of years ago, but it is one that the story is not lost amongst all of the really intense footage that you're seeing and a crazy journalistic look into a conservation issue in the Sea of Cortez. And it's just one that I found elicited every emotion in me and really communicated to me the power and potential of film for advocacy and for social justice and environmental issues. And it's funny because I think you're right. There is something so important about the story and the simplicity, but every once in a while you'll get a film that really nails it with having exactly the right amount of story and fantastic production. And so there's a balance there. But I think, yeah, that's one. Sea of Shadows is one that I would definitely point to as an impactful film.
Yeah, that film actually is given our team, a film that I'm working on right now, a lot of inspiration because it's an impressive documentary and it's like sprawling. It just goes and goes and goes in all these different places and you're just like on the edge of your seat the whole time. And it's all real. It's like, yeah, it's really cool.
Actually, Nick, would you want to talk a little bit more about the film that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm working with a team that's primarily based in the West Coast called Coextinction, and we're making a film called Coextinction. But the film is about the southern resident orcas. It's a subspecies of orcas that lives predominantly in the Salish Sea, which is a large body of water that sort of encompasses the waters kind of like midway up the Vancouver Island and then all the way down to parts of Washington, all the way kind of to the Snake River. And, you know, Vancouver, Seattle, all that kind of stuff. So quite a busy area. Lots of people live here. Lots of people travel here, and these orcas are sort of taking on, I think, the brunt of the damage that we've done here, and the damage extends, you know, into relations with Indigenous nations here, extends into our treatment of nature through, you know, mass industrialization and, you know, crowding of the lands and waters here. And so, yeah, we're kind of just trying to tell the story of this whale, of this pod of whales, and then sort of, we start off as a story about the orcas, and then we sort of try to dissect and like go layer, and we go down and down and down. And then, I mean, essentially we go out and out and out, and we try to tell the story of the entire ecosystem and our relationship with the ecosystem and what's going on. And we, again, kind of in the sea of shadows vibe, trying to kind of guide the viewer along, like make it feel a bit like a thriller and an adventure. We're on the ground, we're in these really interesting places, we're talking to people, we're like stuff's going down, you know, we got like interesting characters coming in and out. And yeah, so it's like a documentary, it's like 90 minutes, and we're currently editing it. So we shot it 2018, 19, and a little bit this year actually. And yeah, we're putting it all together. And that's been a whole process in writing, a process in storytelling, in character building, in like making things clear for the audience. Like we want the audience to take action afterwards. And so like, are those steps clear, what they can do, and like how everything is connected and what their role is in this problem. So yeah, it's definitely like the biggest project I've undertaken, but the more I dive into it, the more I just like really connect with this issue, and it really checks a lot of my boxes in terms of like what I want to do with my career and with my life really. And I think it's an important issue, and I think there's something for everyone there, and I just hope it's exciting. I know it's exciting. Like we'll watch cuts and we'll be like, oh, we're making a good film. So it's kind of like that, but we're in that process where we're not quite there yet, but we can see all the pieces coming together, so it's exciting.
That sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question I have is, so what do you think are the key components of telling a good story through film? Erin, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I can start. I think we've already touched on it a little bit, but when I hear a question like this, I always just think, you know, it's so, like Jimmy was saying earlier, it's so much more about the story than it is about the visuals. And it's so much more about the story than it is about the equipment that you have or the financial resources that you have to make a film. And so I think when it comes to telling a good story through film, I guess I'll boil it down to the most important part for me is having a genuine passion for the thing that you're making a film about. That is going to translate through to your film so much more than the other resources that you can harness from around the world. It's genuinely believing in the film that you're making, whether that's from an artistic perspective or from an advocacy perspective, or however you're approaching the film. It's you personally wanting to bring that story into the world. That's what, to me, is going to communicate the story most strongly through film.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, what about you? I'm curious from your perspective, from more of the artistic side of things, not so much the docu-style that Nick and I are coming at it from. What's your perspective?
I think I think you're right. The first thing is honing in on your story. You know, so you know, Nick said it. Everything has a story, and you have to make a decision on what story you want to tell. But I think that once that's done, it's about supporting that story in an entertaining way. So whether, you know, I can tell a story about an orange, you know, and but you can, though. You can tell the story. I can tell a story about this orange. Please do. I could tell a story about this orange, and it's all about the decision you make of like what story you want to tell. And once you make that decision, let's say I want to tell the origin story of this specific orange, right? Then if I'm tracking it back, then I can tell a million different stories about who touched it and what tree it came off of and where that tree came from. And it's just about supporting that original seed idea in the most creative and entertaining way you can. And then, you know, with an artful eye, when it comes to film, hopefully you can create some beautiful images in doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, you just peel away, right? Peel away at that story. Where do you want to stop?
Yeah, and how you want to peel it, right? Like I can peel this and make it look like a face, or I can peel it and make it look like something else. Like how do you
just squash it?
You could squash it, or I can just put it right in my mouth, the whole thing. Yeah.
So the next question I have is for Nick and Erin. And it's in the footsteps of our ancestors, one of the films that you worked on together. it required you to team up with others. So I'm wondering, what role does relationship building play in your work and your projects?
I mean, it's everything. Yeah, it was everything for our film, and you know, it wouldn't have been possible without strong relationships. And yeah, so that's really important to, yeah, like, and again, it kind of comes at with the storyteller versus the subject, and who is telling the story and where you are and whose land or waters you're on, and it's important to, yeah, in our project it was really important to have that strong connection in the community. And the footsteps of our ancestors takes place in the Satu region of the Northwest Territories, and we worked with the Satu, Dene, and Métis up there to make this project come to life. And I mean, it was a story, as much a story that we wanted to tell as a story that they wanted to tell. And that was, you know, from before anything could happen, that needed to happen. We needed to be on the same page and have a strong relationship there, just based on the nature of the story. But like, I mean, you know, that aside, like if you're going to capture stories, or if you're working with a client or you're working with a team, right? Like you need to be on the same page, or at least you need to have someone who kind of has that strong vision, who can help kind of move the pieces around. But it's very important. Yeah, I mean, we could go on this for a while, so maybe we'll just, Aaron, like, yeah, big takeaways from that project.
Oh, I think you nailed it in your first few words. Relationships are everything. Unless you're making a solo film, which has a lot of merit in itself and is really cool, relationships are everything when it comes to filmmaking. And so, Olivia, I know you studied journalism and documentary filmmaking, and you've produced films all over the world, so you're experienced with this too. What do you think are the biggest challenges in developing a story that isn't your own?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, you guys really hit the nail on the head there. I think it's so important to collaborate with people who are from the communities that you're working in, or, you know, at least have a very strong connection. You know, if not, like almost working with the people that you're filming. So yeah, one of the films that I made during my master's thesis was it was called The Blue Devil, and it's about the largest lake in Ethiopia, and how the community was fighting against this invasive plant called water hyacinth that was spreading across the lake and threatening their livelihoods. And for that film, my co-producer, she's from Ethiopia. And we worked on that film together, and you know, I think it was just so, like, I don't think I could have done it without her. And I mean, it was her idea originally, and I was the one who was coming on to help her. And you know, and I think that that's so important for any film that you're doing in another country or in another place that's not your own community. And you know, I think in a way the pandemic has actually helped that, because a lot of people can't travel. And so in a way, like if you want to make a film or tell a story that's somewhere other than where you are, you have to collaborate with people. And so it, you know, if any, that's definitely one of the benefits of our changing world. So the next question I have is for Jimmy. So you're an actor and a writer and a director and a producer. You have a lot of experience with filmmaking from various angles. I'm wondering if you can talk about how you move between these different positions, and how does having experience in all these positions shape your work?
There's I mean, for me, there's a couple things to that, and I think that when deciding like what form to take in terms of a story that I want to tell, it really depends on how I envision it and how much of that story I think needs to be told. So, for instance, you know, something that I feel it can be told rather quickly and impactfully, without needing too much time, I can put into a play format. I could write a stage script for, because you're typically usually limited to an hour and a half, 2 hours. You could also write a feature with it, I guess. But then some of my ideas for stories have required a little bit more development in terms of storyline, and those would come in the form of a television series, let's say, like a pitch that I would put out for a long running series. So that's one element or one deciding factor in what form you take. As far as what role I take, I mean, I don't really have, aside from the stories that I decide to do myself. If I hop onto a project, I'm asked to direct or I'm asked to act, I don't really have much of a say in that. I mean, I guess I could convince the team that I can do a million other things as well, but I tend to try to stick to one job. But at the end of the day, it's just about playing your role in that storytelling, right? So as an actor, my job is to be able to not only try to complete the arc of the character I'm playing, but aid in the storytelling and in its arc itself, in the story's arc. As a director, it's about overall vision and making sure that the story's arc is clean, everything is clean, and fulfills your vision as an artist. And then I guess as a producer, there's a million other things that kind of play into that, So at the end of the day, I think it's just about like playing your role, making sure you know how to play your role.
Even in this project that I'm working on right now, like I started off as more of the cinematographer, and then I took a step back. I was more of a producer, and I took another step back, and now I'm an editor. And so it's like in my full time is editing now. And so I kind of have to I'm switching my brains sometimes, and sometimes I find that difficult to be like I want to, and it's a small team, so we work a lot together, but picking where your role is, doing that really well, and finding it in yourself to just do that really, really well, and know that the team is still going to function even if you're not in that exact position that you wanted, or you're not, but it's been a learning process for me too, changing things around, especially as Olivia too, as a sole proprietor, as your own business, as a solo filmmaker, you're kind of asked to do the writing, the directing, the shooting, the editing, and it goes on and on and on, and that kind of, it's a learning process in itself. How do you, where do you best fit in, and what?
Oh, for sure. I mean, in my current role, there's one other person who does help with video, but I'm kind of the only person who's doing it full time. And it can be very overwhelming to be working on a project and doing everything. It's always nice to have collaborators. But then, there's also benefits to that. You can have more, you can really make your vision come to life, so the next question is, when telling someone else's story, how do you ensure that you're doing it justice?
Ooh, big question.
So there's a thing, I think we touched upon it a little bit, but there's a saying that's been going around for a few years now, especially when it comes to Indigenous story. And I first heard Kevin Loring, the head of the Indigenous section of the NAC's theater, talk about it in their grand opening. And he said, nothing about us without us. So, we're talking about implicating that specific person, group, whoever it may be in the creation, and making sure that they're not just a subject, but they're a co-creator with you.
Yeah.
I think that's the big one for me.
Yep, totally. And something that I wrote down too is let the material speak. If what you captured is one way, and maybe you had a different thought or a different perspective on what you wanted that footage to do, Like, let the material speak, right? Like, you captured this person or this subject telling their story in this way, and like that's what you need to do justice, and bringing them into the process, you know, that is a huge part of making sure that that happens. But you know, not like trying to just follow what you got as best and like as honestly as you can, I think. And yeah, like then that's something that I'm working on too, is like bringing into the process, and like, yeah, like making the team a core part of the team that's actually executing the film, the people who the film is about, for sure.
Yeah, I think Olivia was just talking a minute ago about having, creative control to bring their vision to life. But when you're telling somebody else's story, that's exactly the situation in which you need to let go of a little bit of what your vision is for the story. And remember that while you might have a creative vision, and that creative vision is a very important piece of bringing the film to life, it's not, there's a fine balance between bringing your vision for the story to life and kind of stamping out some of the most important parts of the story. And I think it just requires a lot of reflexivity and thinking about your own position as a filmmaker in those circumstances. And I think sometimes with film or research or whatever it is, we forget that we can always go back and ask and say, does this reflect what you want your story to, how you want your story to be told? Like, has this rough edit I've put together captured what you were trying to say here? And I think just including them in that post-production process as an ongoing narrative instead of okay, here's the final deliverable is really important, and often underutilized and taken for granted. Especially in this day and age where we can just pop into a Zoom call with anyone and include them virtually, even if we're not there in the same geographic location. It's very easy to make contact with most people these days. And so I think that is definitely something that should be emphasized when you are trying to bring somebody else's story to life.
Yeah, having good reviewers, having people who are willing to, look at an assembly, look at a rough cut, like give you all this feedback, that is so essential for making any film. Because when you're just looking at something for hours in the edit room, like you start to be blind to certain things, or you start to get really attached to a certain cut. But yeah, it's so important to have people who are willing to just be real with you and just say, okay, this isn't working, or this is how it's coming across. So next question is, what tips do you have for someone who's interested in or is beginning their career in filmmaking? I guess, what do you wish you knew? Who wants to start?
I'll go and speak as an actor. So if you're interested in becoming an actor, I think when you're first starting, it doesn't matter what form you want to take. I think that acting at its core is kind of the same regardless of who's watching and how you're watching. And I would look for training opportunities. I would look for opportunities to just do it. I think you learn a lot as a performer by doing. And whether you're going to an accredited acting training program or whether you're doing workshops that are offered, I would just jump onto those opportunities and see if you like it, and see in what about it do you like, and what you can hang on to, and from there you get yourself familiar with the acting community or the theater community or the film community close to you, and take opportunities to associate yourself with mentors. The more you're involved in that kind of environment as a performer anyway, and the more you're doing it, the more likely you are to be able to recognize the avenues you need to take. I think it becomes clear to you after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I think that idea of learning by doing is so relevant in any part of the film industry that you're in. And my big advice would be to just do it. Just go out and practice, whether or not it's for a professional gig or it's just you with your camera or you know recording yourself practicing acting. I think people oftentimes undervalue the role of practice, and they see these final film products and they say, okay, what I just want to be there now. But you can't strive for perfection right out of the gate. And I think we started this conversation, I was saying that, you know, it was my insecurities that really kept me from getting into film in all these years. And I think that is one of the biggest hurdles to overcome, is this idea that I'm not good enough to do it yet. But you're only going to get good enough if you practice and if you put in the time and effort to learning new skills and honing in on where your creativity lands in filmmaking. So I guess just go do it. Just try it in whatever means you can.
Yeah, because in a hands-on kind of art that we're talking about, theory can only get you so far, right?
Yeah.
So you have to. I mean, even in these training facilities, the biggest takeaways are the projects you create, right? The actual doing of.
Absolutely.
I think on that same vein, too.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Olivia. Is like making it fun. Like you gotta like combine it with something that you're passionate about or that you just like enjoy doing, and like literally smashing together your hobbies and your favorite things, and then like adding in this other element like of making it into a story or a film. Like you're gonna want to do it more. And on that same vein too of our place and like, you know, where and who, it's like think about where you live and like what is your like, because you understand this place the best, right? And like you may know when and where to go to get those interesting stories that like the person who comes into town to go and shoot their film, you know, doesn't really understand. And like so you kind of know the certain spots, and you know the certain characters, and like so yeah, like literally make it fun, enjoy it, and smash together your favorite hobbies, and then like add this other layer. Like if you like juggling, like juggling plus the ocean, try and make something about that. I don't know. For real.
Juggling oranges. That's
Juggling oranges at the ocean. I'd watch that.
So Jessica from the audience is wondering about whether an education is better than pursuing filmmaking independently. And then a similar question from Paulina is asking, is a master's degree advantageous? So we have kind of a mix of backgrounds here. So I studied journalism in my undergrad, and then I also did that in my master's as well. So, you know, I think on my end, you know, I think it was a huge advantage for me to go to school for sort of filmmaking, but, you know, I don't think that that's everyone's path. And I also realized that, you know, it was expensive and I'm still paying off the student debt. And so, you know, is that going to be the best option for you? Or would you rather spend that money like buying a camera and actually kind of going out and doing it yourself? Because there's a lot of resources online. So, you know, I think it really just depends on the person and their scenario. And yeah, it can be a huge advantage, but then yeah, it can also be a huge burden with the financial burden. Does anyone want to kind of share how your path ended up?
I mean, I think there's definitely some like fundamentals that I missed by not going to film school, because I kind of went the more independent route and just sort of picked up my camera and went from there. So definitely some fundamentals that I'm like learning now later in my career. But I've sort of like, yeah, filled that gap with like the internet, because like everything's on the internet and YouTube is a university in itself. And number two, that like what you were saying, Jimmy, about community, I really early on just tried to like insert myself into the film community and like just asked a lot of questions and cold called, you know, my favorite filmmakers and like sent emails and like had a lot of, and I'm still like doing this, like trying to have lots of chats with people who are established and who have formal training, and just like trying to absorb knowledge through them that way. and I think I'm going to stick that way. I might have like enjoyed maybe like a more journalistic degree, like sort of how to work with material and how to like, yeah, kind of like ask the right questions to elicit or to like learn about a place in a certain way. But in terms of like the fundamentals of like, yeah, how to use a camera, like that kind of stuff is really easy and accessible. But the other stuff I'm trying to get through osmosis by like, yeah, inserting myself into the community as best I can. I think that was a really good point, Jimmy, about community for anyone.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as far as school goes, as an actor anyway, what it provides is an opportunity to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a bubble, and the bubble is usually pretty safe, and you can take risks, and you can fail, and you can try something else, and you can explore your creative mind as a performer, and try to hone your voice, and so it gives you that platform and those resources to explore,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I appreciated most, I think, from it.
Yeah.
You learn a lot about yourself more than anything else. But that doesn't necessarily mean, I agree with Olivia, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's for everybody. I know a lot of actors who didn't go to theater school or didn't go to acting school, and they have successful careers, and I think that's just because they were able to do it. So whether you do it in a school or you do it on your own, it's important to give yourself the opportunity to fail a little bit at first, whatever failure means.
Mm-hmm. Whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a few more audience questions. So one for Jimmy from Stephanie. What advice do you have for facilitators who may be experienced in working with youth but inexperienced with filmmaking, and who want to engage with children and youth in storytelling through film?
I think we're doing a speed round too on here because we got a bunch of questions we're going to get through.
Yeah, we have to keep it quick.
Yeah. So if I understood it correctly, a facilitator who doesn't have experience in film but wants to engage with youth using film?
Experience working with youth but inexperienced with filmmaking, and they want to engage children and youth through storytelling through film.
Do it. Just do it. Like, what's stopping you? I understand there might be a hesitancy, but you can learn with them. And if that's a little nerve-wracking, then bring somebody on board to help consult and build your action plan, But like, I think a part of the fun is just exploring, getting creative with things and learning, and it's not going to be an award-winning film. You're making something because it's fun, right? You're not making money off of it. You're not doing anything else. So dive head first, do it. That's my advice.
And the next question is for Nick. Anna asks, what is your advice about trying to capture footage during a program that can be used later?
Cool. Well, basics, I mean, you got to make sure it's in focus, the camera was running, the sound is good, like that it's actually a usable clip. But in terms of like when you're in a space, thinking about how this stuff can be used later, I try to think about like different, almost like scopes. It's like, okay, you have this one, maybe, or like lenses, right? Like you're zoomed in on one thing, but then like take a step out. Okay, like if now you're at a medium sort of shot, what could you get at the medium shot? Okay, wide, like what is it that like you could use to build this story? Like, where are we? What is this thing? And then what is that thing? And then what is that thing? And sort of like step out of the scene for a second and try to capture like as much as you can around you. And then I have to say also think about like different mediums to like sound. Like, are you getting, beautiful sounds in this area? Are you getting still photographs? Trying to think about that. So like opening and closing that lens, and then different mediums.
And the next one is for me, and Michael asks, how do you tend to fund your projects? I realize there are grants available. Is there a go-to funding option? So for grants, and also if anyone else has any grants that you want to plug, just chime right in. But it depends on what you're trying to fund, and also like where you're based, and if it's a documentary, all these things. One place that I usually check is the Pulitzer Center for crisis reporting. They always have really good grants for environmental type report, or just general like film documentary type stuff. And then the Earth Journalism Network, they always have grants. National Geographic has a pretty strong grant program that's more science focused. So usually you kind of have to team up with a scientist. I haven't looked at that grant in a while, so actually I'm not sure if they've changed it. But and then yeah, and then I guess, how else do you kind of look for funding?
I mean, funding comes from all different angles. Like it could be local businesses, it could be universities and organizations. Not like, so kind of like, yeah, what's your story? Who's interested in the story? What are the connections there? Like, how could this fit in the community? And then like, what, how could people attach onto the story? And I think of like using the story as like a starting point for organizations. So like, once you have this, who would want to use this story to talk, or as an opportunity to talk about issues or about the subject of the story, right? And then like kind of go from there. Like, who could use this film as something,
Yeah. And I just one thing to add to that, because I think it's an important thing that we need to start thinking of as artists when we're creating story, is that we think about funding and how to create our story, but I think we should start thinking about how we can offer things to people and communities with the creation of our story. So who do we associate ourselves with? What organizations do we associate ourselves with after the fact? Like what are we doing in terms of community engagement?
Yeah.
So it's like, so we're not just taking, but we're giving as well. I think that it's a thing that I've, over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, have really thought about. And I think it just creates a really healthy relationship and ecosystem in terms of filmmaking or art creation in general.
And then I'll plug one thing to bring it back full circle to grants. I think it's so important to budget in your grant applications to have some kind of distribution that will give back to the community, and making sure that you have the financial resources necessary to get the story to the people who need it most, or to the people who were so integral in helping to make it. And don't be afraid to ask for that money in grant applications if you're doing it, if you're going that route for funding, because that is a key piece of the storytelling process, is getting the story back to people. So.
So the next question is from Morgan. It's not directed to anyone, so anyone who wants to take this one. What has been your favorite film project to date, and which do you think has had the largest impact?
Oh, I mean, I think the project that Aaron and I did, I'm very proud of that project. I think, we learned a lot as filmmakers, and I think we also, worked really well with the community, and it was a value for a lot of people, I think. Yeah, in terms of like, impact, still kind of working on impact in all projects, like trying to make the most impact, trying to like use this medium. And I'm excited about the project that we're working on right now. So it hasn't had that impact yet, but like actually already it's activated a lot of the orca and conservation community on the West Coast. So I think the co-extinction project I'm working on right now, I'm pretty excited about in terms of impact. Yeah.
And I'd just add with that project, impact, for a long time, I had been thinking of impact as viewership and how many people saw the film, but I've come to definitely realize in the rollout of it that impact is so much more than how many people have seen the film. And it's about how people have internalized it, and the impact that it's had on me and Nick and our co-producer Norman and our co-project director Jordan, and all of the people who were so intimately involved in the film, and the impact that it's had in those less tangible or quantifiable ways.
So the next question is, Brenda asks, what storytelling are you all interested in, such as comedy, drama, horror, etc.? I feel like this is a good question for Jimmy because you.
That was my aunt. Shout out to my aunt Brenda. What's up?
Yeah, Brenda.
I don't necessarily have a favorite.
Yeah.
I think when I think of something that I can create a story about, or I think about a story, one of the first things I think about is how do I tell this, or what style will it take, you know? And it goes from there. I don't think I really have a preference, to be honest with you. So I know that's a boring answer, but is the truth.
I think kind of like if I throw it back to my favorite film, you know, The Runners, just storytelling that's like real and honest and authentic. And that's what I love about documentary, is that you're just capturing the people as they are, and just trying to like bring out, just show people like the vast diversity and beauty that we all like have, and just how cool we all are, really, and how like similar we are too, and stuff like that. So yeah, I like storytelling that's just real and authentic for me.
So thank you all for participating today, and thanks to the audience for tuning in to another Bridge event. So if we did not get to your question, please leave them in the comments, and we'll make sure to answer them. Does anyone have any closing thoughts or reflections they'd like to share?
I think my biggest two takeaways, and really important to drive home, is Jimmy, two things that you said, Jimmy: nothing about us without us, and you know, what are you giving, what are you taking? I think you can ask that question in like all aspects of your life, at like whether it's a relationship you have with a friend or family, or something that you're doing in your community, or a story you're trying to tell. What are you giving? What are you taking? I think that's really important. Yeah.
I would say to anybody who's thinking about doing this, telling stories in any capacity, just try it, just do it. You know, if you have an urge, follow that urge, and you'll find out pretty quickly whether or not you want to continue doing it. I think.
Yeah,
that would be my big one.
Yeah, I think it's about believing in the story. You know, it can be so easy to get caught up in the doubts of skills and abilities and finances and time and all of these resources. And it's like, don't forget to ground yourself back into the reason you started a storytelling project. Like, if you believe in your story enough, you're going to get it out into the world somehow, and just hold on to that and continue with it, whether it's with film or through another medium. But yeah, don't stop, persevere, get the story out there, because it's probably a pretty important story if you're giving it that much thought, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would also just say, you know, if you want to start making films, you know, just to echo what Jimmy said, like, just start doing it. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a really fancy camera, like, you know, just use like the resources that you have. And also, another really good thing is, if you want to get better at making films, watch good films. Like, just, you know, watch a lot of stuff and just get inspired and say, okay, they're doing, like, just think more critically about what you're watching and think, okay, I really like what they did there. I'm going to try and replicate that myself, and all of those things. All right, I think that's a really great place to end it. So thanks again. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, thanks everyone. That was awesome.